We all have had dreams for a change in this world. I know I've had. And every time these dreams come, it's a hard task because it could be quite daunting. So for me, once I speak with my inner self and say, okay, this is the right thing to do. Still, taking out to the world sometimes, like I said, could be really daunting. So I keep asking myself, what's the worst that can happen? It was a really difficult time. This was one of those times in 2000 when I had to make some hard decisions. 2000 was a major political upheaval for us. There was a political crisis, pockets of violence. Our parliamentarians were taken hostage for 56 days. And more than anything, we started hearing a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, and a lot of hatred being spewed. It was obvious that something had to change. Well, at least my inner being was saying something had to change. We needed a platform for cohesion, for rethinking a lot of things that was being said. And I thought, okay, this platform needs to be created. I spoke with the friends and started an organization, an NGO. One of the things that kept being said again and again was about economic disparity. Crisis basically brought out the stereotypes that we all carry. Being a multi-ethnic society, we all have our stereotypes, normally simmering at the bottom, but any major crisis brings all of it out. And there was a lot of talk about economic disparity. So I thought maybe let's start there. So, very easy to say, but once I decided this had to be done, I resigned from my job, made a move to living closer to communities because everything was being done in the name of the communities, the grassroots. And I shifted out of Suva and into the West to trying to be closer to the communities. First of all, if we're talking about economic disparity, now we needed a model that would create economic opportunities for thousands of people without having any funding. I didn't have any resources. It was just an idea at that stage. And how do we create an economic model that gives money for thousands so that people really shift out of poverty? And along the way, look at other gaps, these gaps that hopefully would never be used again as an excuse for any crisis. Having looked at communities or studying communities over a period of time, we knew there were strengths. People had food, they were growing, preserving, sustaining the people and the communities for generations. So one of the first things I thought was, looking at the food that we had, looked at the market, and market had all these foods as well, but they were being imported. I thought if these foods could go into the market, that's a regular income for most people. Having grown up in Indian tradition, I knew there were lots of preserves which had long shelf life. So we called out for recipes, and this lovely woman, Saras, stirring the pot, who at that time was going around cooking in many events to make her money, volunteered her recipe, and we decided to package and market and trial it. Her product was launched on International Women's Day, March 8th in 2003. It was just a model being tried out at that particular time. The product was great, but there had to be a lot that had to be worked for the market. The planning, organizing, making sure the volumes were there. So it needed a lot of training, a lot of processes, value chain. But more than anything, it needed the belief that it could be done, the social empowerment, the dreams. So we worked with her and trying to work on her dreams, and then we worked with a whole team of people to make this project work. Now, this product has a market, has been sitting on the shelf for more than a decade, but now it's created market for hundreds and hundreds of other women who supply her tamarind, a wild fruit, for the last so many years. All year round, they can have it preserved. Whenever they need money, they can sell their tamarind to this process. Other than having this dream and this product coming into the market, we had to also work on savings. Again, working with the dreams to see where all this money would be used. So in rainy days, because most of the times we found that any crisis hits, there's no money. So we started a process of savings. Maria is our spice girl. She handles all the spices for Saras, And now, over time, she's also been able to save and has been able to tell many stories of how she's using this money for her children and for her future. Saras tells the stories of how she's been able to rebuild her house, educate her children, and she's got funds for retirement. After this, once this got going, we were able to evolve about 30, 40 other gourmet products, all in the market. Other chutneys and preserves came from the Indian tradition. From the indigenous Fijian tradition, we were able to get flour, root crop flour, desiccated coconut, virgin coconut oil. Desiccated coconut that's been coming from the islands, so that was also income for many of those communities. What also happened was we evolved different models. Here, Saras is an individual, now working with whole collectives, but also collectives like salt making, were being done in a group, but we had to work how will it benefit individually. But one of the key things was that if this was so easy, why are people not doing it? We kept asking that question. We realized in Fiji, when we're born to our families, our communities, our traditional systems, our religious groups. We have a great sense of belonging, over-belonging at times. So any great idea we have, it goes through, we discuss with our friends and families. Myself, my cousin side, my father's side alone is 90 plus cousins, just first cousins. So you think, you want to share with somebody, you discuss with somebody, and then, ideas, instead of, everybody has an opinion. I'm sure our rugby coach knows that more than anyone, every coach gets super coached. So any idea gets so coached that it gets killed before that idea sees the light of the day. And we're very used to being ridiculed. I remember as a child, even in primary school, when I was topping my class, my teachers would always find a way of ridiculing me. Maybe it is a process of thickening the skin, but mostly what it does is kills our spirit. My spirit probably sustained itself well because my father believed that I could do anything, as from a very early age. And maybe that's what sustained me and helped my thick skin grow. But what we found with most of these people was that they had great dreams, great ideas, too scared to discuss it, too scared to take it further for the fear of ridicule. It was not only in adults, women, we worked with men, we worked with farmers, it was also in our young people. So we looked at the issue of unemployment. We are always told 14,000 people coming out of schools, only 7,000 getting jobs. So we looked at the unemployed youths, and we did a trial with them. We've seen them going straight into jobs, and we did a trial with a group of 20, first trial was about 2007, where we worked with the young people, looked at their dreams, asked them to work on their dreams, and we did 2 weeks of intensive creative program where they looked at the monsters, the fears, the traumas, not only of themselves, but what happens is we learn from other people's experience. Somebody else gets ridiculed, you don't want to ask a question in class. So over time, we all absorb everybody else's traumas. 2 weeks of trauma, this whole process of looking at the dreams and the fears, these youths, when they were placed in jobs, 1 year later, 80% of them were able to retain their jobs. So since then, we've done 400 to 500 youth training. And all the young people, we survey them on a regular basis. 80% of them consistently have been able to retain their jobs. So we realize it's the fear. It's that the other part, the social empowerment that had to work for any economic program to work. As we go in communities, we also find that we are generally referred to, most vulnerable of groups. In any community we go to, there's always few disabled people with disabilities. And initially we were just asked, okay, can we organize some income generation for them? Where we had difficulty with people with disabilities is there's somebody who's bedridden. In communities, there's no wheelchair access and so on. So the other person, if a husband is bedridden or a wife is bedridden, the other person becomes a caregiver as well as the income earner. And to create those sorts of income in those sort of circumstances are generally very challenging. But we have been working with various people for this. When we asked people, what were these disabilities, again and again, we realized that it was largely due to lifestyle diseases. This is Sairusi. In his 40s, he had a bad injury, early 40s, went to the hospital, and the doctors told him he had diabetes and it had to be amputated. That was the first time he'd ever realized that he had diabetes. We met him in one of our community outreach programs and helped, initially assisted him just with his artificial limb, and working with the whole village now on making the whole community healthy. So other than the social empowerment program and economic empowerment program, our journey also took the health empowerment program. In each work, anything we do, now we look at food, what are we eating? 30 years ago, we did not have these diseases, so we're revisiting our lifestyle, what it was, and how do we integrate it in all our activities right now. So now that became a 3-tier program for our journey. So social empowerment at an individual level worked fine, economic level worked fine, but then working at whole collectives. Because like I said, we have a strong sense of belonging. We have all these traditions, systems, processes which have sustained us for generations. In 2016 February, Fiji was struck by tropical cyclone Winston, the worst recorded in the southern hemisphere. And while it did massive damages all around, where it touched the shore, devastation has been absolutely unbelievable. I'll talk about one strip of about a dozen villages in Nakorotumbo district and the surrounds, where there was basically nothing left. Some of the villages didn't have a single structure standing. Some had 2, partially destroyed. And these 200, 300 people have been having had to live in these until TAPS or some assistance came. When we visited some of these communities, there was so much shock and devastation. Men said to us, we get up, go, look at the foundation, come back, sit down, we don't know where to begin. And here is the whole system. Now we're looking at villages. So we asked them, okay, what needed doing? We talked to different sections of the community and everybody said shelter. Unless we have home, even a temporary home, we can't think, we can't move. So we started having consultations with them. What do you need to build? Do you have carpenters? Yes, we have many, many carpenters. Okay, foundation, they said we can use this foundation. We just need anything to get us started. Timber, whole forests were destructed. So they said from our forest, can fell timber as long as you can make some chainsaws available. And debris we'll find for our walls, but please provide us some roofing iron for some dry shelter, dry roof, so that at least we have something and we can start. So fine, we thought, okay, it absolutely had to be done. It was a basic humanitarian response. And one of the key things along Friends' journey has kept us sustained is been our value of humanity. Anything that our people need, we've been trying to, because we kept doing the gap analysis to make sure, to look at that these needs do not become a burden on us later. So when we talked to everybody, the women, men, youth, we thought, okay, we can bring a chainsaw, but who will do the cutting? We can bring a roofing iron, how will we organize ourselves from here? So we discussed with the whole community, and they discussed among themselves. Each village talked to other villages. 9 village heads talked to each other. We just facilitated the process, organized the transport to make sure that consultations were being done. The women organized themselves, okay, men, if you are going to be doing the building, we will go fishing, collect the fish, or we'll start collecting whatever was blown away. And youth volunteered and said, we will cut the timber. So the whole system got organized within 2 days. All these consultations happened, the elders gave their blessings, the women got organized, the men got organized, the youth got organized. This is 24-year-old Alifereti Namua. He started volunteering from week 1. I caught up with him in his village, Vere Vere. So they had already done 4 villages by the time he got to his village. I asked him, your own home was destroyed. How come you've been helping others? He said, their family, huh? I said, whose family? He said, all these villages, Nakorovo, and he named all the way to Namukandra. Their family, huh? We have to build together. I was quite stunned. It was very spontaneous. And he said, we help each other. And sure enough, while he was helping others, the other villagers were helping his father build this house. By the way, they're building a mahogany house from their own hut, own forest. And I said, you'll be the richest in this whole community because you'll have mahogany houses by the end of it. But here was this community when we actually saw the youths volunteering. When they got up and they started organizing the timber, the whole communities were able to move from the shock that they had. They were able to move because here was help that was arriving. So we've seen our communities have a lot of strength. It's about organizing, facilitating, empowering further. The same community, if we do not look at the structures and we run with individuals alone, it may not necessarily work. So one thing I'll be able to share with you from my journey in the last decade or so has been that our traditions, which have sustained us for generations, have got the answers. There's nothing that we have done which is absolutely out of the ordinary or something new. All the answers that have come from our own people, from our own tradition. I've often been asked, what's the success of the organization? It's been the people. It's their own strengths. Once they take the ownership of their own dreams and work with their strengths, they achieve. We are just facilitators. And a key for this has been the dignity. Each process is designed so it gives them back their dignity. So each time, any program, we ask the same thing. What's your dream? How can you make it work? And when there's even slight hesitation, we ask, what's the worst that can happen? And we take chances. Thank you.